Sí, muchas gracias.
De Australia. Entonces, está con nosotros Sonia. Adelante, por favor.
My name is Sonja McFarlane. I'm from Australia, and I'm here. I represent the Australian Organisation for Quality on the APQO Core Council, but I'm very excited to be presenting this as part of my own career, is what I do. So I work as a consultant for laboratories. Yes, there we go. So what I was interested in bringing this presentation to you was about test results. So a test result is a test result. However, there can also be poor quality test results. And if we have poor quality test results, our decision making is not going to be great decision making. For instance, if we have a water sample that we've tested and the result says that it's fine, but actually it wasn't fine, we're not going to be making actions that we need to take. It might have public health implications, it might have a lot of other implications in a negative way on our society. We don't want that to happen. In the reverse case, we may have some results that are showing that the water is terrible, it's failing to meet the standards, and yet if it actually is meeting the standards, we're likely to spend more money on infrastructure that we need to, put extra effort and time in and spend resources that didn't need to be spent. So how can we make sure that, number one, we are getting good quality results, and number two, that we're applying those results correctly in a way that makes the most of the fact that we have a result. So, following what Andrea said, we're all about risk in quality, aren't we? Quality systems are to address risk. And when we look at laboratories, there are some key areas of risk that we can identify. Equipment calibration. We need to make sure that our equipment is reliable and traceable in terms of its metrology. We've got training. There's risks that come in around training processes if people haven't been taught to follow procedures correctly. Traceability, as we talked about, there's a risk if we don't know the uncertainty around our results. Sampling is a huge area, which I'm going to talk about. Lack of impartiality is something that people don't often think about as risk in laboratories. We like to think that laboratories are perfect, but impartiality is critical. And test methods can also affect the risk, like how reliable are the test methods. Just because something's a test method doesn't actually mean that it's reliable. There's two examples here. I did have some pictures. I think this might be an old version of my presentation. The same laboratory received samples from the client, and it was totally full to the top. But he can't use that because he's testing for sediment inside it, and he needs to shake the bottle to mix up before he pours it out. But the client filled it to the top. Another laboratory I worked with was testing for total dissolved solids. That's a critical point in water quality, total dissolved solids. He presented it with a gap. But for that test, if you have a gap, you have carbon dioxide in that water, and in the air will go into the water and change the solubility of your sediment, and your sediment will start to drop out in the sample because you left an air gap at the top. So the sample being tested didn't represent the sample that was taken because the air had affected it. So this is so important to know that people think, I gave a sample to a lab. Of course, just give me the result. This is Australia, my home country. I live in Perth, down the bottom. Western Australia, my state, is very long. From top to bottom, about 2,500 kilometres, just one state. Kind of like Texas, I believe. It's very, very big. So one of my clients, he received a sample from a client. A laboratory received a sample from the client. The client is up in the Pilbara. See where the big red dot is? That's where most of the iron ore in the world comes from. So there's a lot of iron ore mining there. There was some water issues. Someone bought the sample from there, drove it down to Perth. 15 and a half hours. That's if they didn't stop. They would have stopped. Now, let me tell you about that area. the average temperature can be 50 degrees, 40 degrees, 50 degrees Celsius during the day. How did they bring their sample back? I'm not kidding. On the dashboard of their car, they brought the sample back. And then they give it to the lab and say, please test this, tell me, what is it in it now? I can't remember what the laboratory was testing for, but it affected it to the point where that sample is useless. But the client thinks, I gave you a sample, test my sample, give me the result. Did it pass? Did it fail? So, what do you need to think about when you get your results? If you are using a laboratory, they actually have an obligation under ISO 17025 to talk to you about this very thing, about decisions, about pass or fail. Now, you could adjust those results. So if we said, look, we really want to make sure that it actually passes, maybe we'll move our lower specification lower and our upper specification higher, or the other way around, we might bring our, upper or lower specifications adjust so that we can really be confident that we're meeting our specifications. But make sure if you're getting results, you ask them, particularly if you're deciding if it's a pass or a fail, is it close to that boundary and what's the uncertainty for that test? Because if you don't know the uncertainty, it may be a different result to what you're holding in your hand on the certificate. Myth number 4. As long as testing follows a standard method, I can trust that the result from the laboratory is the one that I'm looking for. Okay, another example from my city of Perth. In Perth, there is an inlet called Coburn Sound. It's about 20 kilometres south of the city of Perth, and it's a very popular water inlet. It's used by the Navy, there's a naval base, it's used by industry for shipping, and it's a very popular fishing spot. If you read my paper, which I submitted to Jose, I actually wrote fighting spot. So I'm really sorry, it's not a popular fighting spot, it's a popular fishing spot. So regularly they have to dredge this channel to make sure that it's deep enough for the ships to come through. And one of my clients was asked to do some testing on limestone because it was going to be dredging up some limestone at the bottom of this channel, causing some particles to go in the water, and they didn't want to kill the fish. So the client said, please do some testing in the lab. What sort of particle size are we going to have in this water if we dredge it? And they did the testing, came back fine. Excellent, we're going to dredge. They did a testing according to what the client asked. Everything looks fine. A few months after, massive deaths of fish, juvenile fish affected. And they thought, well, what happened? We got it tested, we got the result, the particle size was right. What they didn't test for was particle shape. And the particle shape was like a needle. And when you do a particle size test, sometimes you don't pick up that shape. You just get, you've got a long needle and it actually is measuring the diameter. You don't know the length. So a standard test method was used. They did their best, but it was the wrong test method. And they didn't know it was the wrong test method. A lot of people will see something like not detected when you get a result for something. Just because something is not detected doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that the equipment that was used to test that doesn't differentiate to that small level. So when you see a result on a test and say not detected, just bear in mind, it may still be there, just we don't have the technology or you didn't choose a test method that's appropriate for the range of sample size that you're given. Okay, this is my favourite and my biggest rant of all. Myth 6, everyone is honest when it comes to laboratory test results. Don't be surprised in Australia, okay, I don't know about Mexico, maybe you have perfect laboratories with perfect integrity. And the pressure was coming from this contractor company because they had said to the laboratory manager, if you don't give us a pass, we are going to not use your company anymore. There's even been tenders put out. We will only pay you for the passing results. Okay, so this happens. If you are a principal company, I would say get the results directly sent to you. Some of the companies in Australia are doing this now, the main roads departments, getting the subcontracted laboratory to send results straight to them every time it gets tested. And then if it has to be retested or redone, then they know about it. But unfortunately, sad state of affairs, it's reality. Accreditation bodies can only do their best. I don't know, Andrea may have stories. You may hear stories about this happening. It's very hard to prove unless you have a whistleblower, but it happens. So, in conclusion, be aware of the gaps in knowledge that can lead to incorrect interpretation and address those gaps with training and communication. Increase confidence that you'll get increased confidence that decisions are made, and that the actions taken are actually going to be fit for purpose. And that will also support the sustainable application of our resources. We don't want to we want to have a sustainable water resource. We want to use water sustainably, but to do that, we want to be able to make sure we can rely and understand our test results. So, thank you very much. It's been great to be able to share with you.
Sonja McFarlane, as a person and water quality professional, what is your technique to know whether or not you should drink running water or bottled water in different countries that you visit?
I think it's an interesting question. I generally take the advice from my Australian government website. So it says different countries, and it will say be careful drinking this in this country or whatever. So if I hear that from a country, then I will use bottled water. But to be honest, here in Mexico, generally I would think not to use the running water, but I brush my teeth. I forget. So that's a good question.